Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Exceptional Relationships. I'm your host, Jason Safford, founder of Exceptional Results Now, here with my fabulous co-host, Ronique Clarke.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
Good, How
Good.
is you?
And so I'll start today's episode by asking you a question, which is, uh, do you like asparagus? Yes
If
or
I like
no?
asparagus,
Yeah.
if I like asparagus when it goes with salmon.
Okay.
Yeah, I like
All right.
asparagus when it goes with salmon.
Okay. Now you can ask me the same question.
Do you like asparagus?
No.
Nah.
No. And so today's episode is the power of no.
Oh no! Yay!
And why is it so powerful to be able to say no?
You know how invigorating it is to tell someone no,
Oh,
and to show somebody that you have boundaries and you have standards, and you you are, for lack of a better term, expecting certain things to go a specific way in your life, and you're trying to position yourself in a certain way, in a certain path for you to elevate yourself to become the best version of you, and someone comes into that space and wants to be a part of it, and the energy isn't right, so you can say no. And that's a very liberating feeling.
and I have to tell you that just being able to say no to, the question of asparagus, you know, for
Hmm.
years, that was something that, I was shamed for, that I
Yeah.
didn't like something.
Hmm.
And people be like, well, why don't you like it? Do you have
Hmm.
to have a reason?
Ex-
No.
exactly. So you don't like asparagus either because of the way it looks, or the way it tastes, or the way it
Yeah.
makes you feel. So of course you're going to say no to something like that.
Hmm.
So it is taking that concept and putting it in the context of interactions with people, whether it be professional interactions or even romantic interactions, or interactions between family or friends or what have you. It is very important for you to really step up and stand up on your own 2 feet. And if something is not comfortable to you, you should have the strength to say no.
And I think what's really important for our listeners to understand is that finding the strength to say no isn't easy.
That's true.
But exactly as you said, there's a freedom that comes with it, number one. But
That's
there's
true.
also a level of credibility and
Yes.
respect that people give you
Hmm.
when you're willing to say no. It's almost like
Yep.
you suddenly command attention when
Yep,
you
that's
say
true.
no.
That is true. And there's an old saying that says, if you have to stand for something, because if you do stand for something, you fall for anything, right?
Right.
So in in that regard, one must keep in mind that the word no, it is basically you standing up for yourself, and you showing up for yourself in a particular situation. That no simply means I am doing what is true to me,
Hmm.
and I'm doing what speaks to me, or I'm trying to move myself in a specific direction that speaks to me, that speaks to my soul. So yeah, man, say no. If you need to say no, because a lot of people, but I realize a lot of people are afraid to say no, and then they say yes, and then they put themselves in compromising situations that could have been avoided had they just stood up and just said, no, I'm not going to do this, or no, I'm not comfortable, or no, I don't feel that this is right. That kind of a way. So, oh man, you need to listen to that inner voice. And if you have to say no, say no. Don't let anybody force you to anything you don't want to do.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you only from the standpoint that is as powerful it is to be able to say no.
Yeah.
Is it also that by saying no, you can get to yes a little bit better?
Maybe. Depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, nobody, I don't know, a lot of people, I shouldn't tell nobody, but a lot of people, some people don't take rejection well, while other people do. They take it well.
Okay.
So when it comes to that, when you hear no, it is in that regard, it's a way for you to evaluate how you are approaching the situation and go back to the drawing board and think of a new strategy so you can get to that yes.
And in that vein, going in that direction, so by the person saying no, by you saying no,
Mm, yeah.
you're letting somebody know that this is a boundary and I'm
Yes.
not going to allow you to cross this boundary.
Mm-hmm.
If you respect that person for saying no, then you
Mm-hmm.
might be willing to work with them based on that no to find
Mm.
out what they need
in
and
order in
want
order
in order for
for
them to
in order
say
for the yes
yes.
to come. Exactly.
Hmm. So so again, the power of no is that you're acknowledging somebody,
Mm-hmm. That's true.
but you're letting them know that this isn't, going to work for you.
Exactly.
And if they're open and respect, what you're saying, then they might
Mm-hmm.
come back to you, you know, with a different direction, or
Mm-hmm.
even ask you, what's the direction forward?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And that's always a question to ask,
Mhm.
depending on the situation, because as always we have to gauge situations and gauge how we interact with others. But that is one question that needs to be asked when you hear no. what
Mhm.
what would be the reasoning behind the no? And second one, depending on what the situation is, what can be done, what can I potentially do in order for me to have that yes? So it's a lot of question that has to be asked. So it just be open.
And one of the challenges that I think often comes out of you saying no
Yeah.
is that the person doesn't necessarily come back to you. They um, react differently than you might have expected.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
or maybe they reacted the way you didn't want them to, but you have the
Mhm.
confidence or the courage to finally stand up for yourself and say, no, I'm not going to do this.
That's true. Hmm.
The downside of that is that now you have to deal with the fallout.
That is true. That is very true, because every and that is the one of the laws of one of the universal laws, cause and effect, right?
Hmm.
Exactly. So every action, there is a supporting and opposing reaction. In other words, in other terms, a ripple effect.
Hmm.
So one must keep in mind, one must keep that in mind and make sure that you have all the information you can possibly have about that particular situation before you say that no, because we don't want anything to come back and haunt you.
Hmm.
So make sure that you explore all your options, explore every single piece of information that you can possibly find about that situation before you go to that no. Because a lot of ways, no is a final no. Sometimes you're not gonna get that yes, but at least you have all the information you can in order for you to make an informed decision on whether or not to say yes or no to something.
Now, here's a different twist on it. Could
Mhm.
somebody say no out of fear and cause themselves to lose opportunities because of that fear?
That's true. You know what? quite a few people have done it. I know I've done that at some point in my life. But you know what? If it's for you, if that opportunity is for you, trust me, it can't. We Jamaicans have a saying: if it's for you, it can't be unfair. You know that kind of a way. If it's for you, it can't be
Right.
unfair for you.
Right.
It will always be there. So even if you say no, that opportunity, if that is really meant for you, it will it will reappear
Hmm.
at some at maybe in a different medium or in a different way. It will present itself in front of you, but it presents itself in front of you if that is what is meant for you to, if that path is what is meant for you to go down. And that's how the universe works. Once you are divinely ordained, if you will, to go down a specific path, it will continuously present itself in front of you. Even though you say no and you veer off into a different path, what you find is that the path will go through a lot of twists and turns until it goes back into the same road that you continuously said no to. So one must always look for those signs. One must always look out for those signs and ask yourself, if I'm saying no to this, will the situation reappear?
And when you think about it that way, what you're really saying is that whenever something is presented to you on first glance, you have an immediate reaction
Mm-hmm.
to that presentation, and it's based on your experience and whatever you're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's going to help you determine your choice.
Yes.
And
Yep.
oftentimes we might say no to something unsuspectingly
Mm-hmm.
because our experience tells us this is not for me right now.
Yes.
Whereas the words you just used, yes, is often from a place of confidence and comfort. So if our experience tells us that whatever's being presented to us is something that we can handle, that we're
Mm-hmm.
confident is within our understanding, as well as that we're confident that it's not bad for us. May not
Yeah.
necessarily be good, but it's not bad for us. It won't hurt.
Uh-huh.
So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, yes is easy.
That's true.
But then there are a lot of people that they're afraid to say no, not because they don't know what it is that they want,
Mm-hmm.
but they're afraid to say no because of the impact on other people,
Mm-hmm.
as well as a lack of awareness to the impact on them that could be detrimental.
Exactly.
So the
Exactly.
people who say no right away out of fear,
Mhm.
they
Yep.
are coming from a place of, total awareness to themselves and a
Mm-hmm.
lack of awareness to everyone else. Whereas a lot of people who are afraid to say no, their fear
Mm-hmm.
comes from an awareness of all the other pieces in
Mm-hmm.
the decision making choice.
Yep.
And so, again, it represents the complexity of
Yeah.
how our minds determine to make the choice as simple as yes or no.
That is true. That is very, very true.
Why are so many people afraid that no, even though it could impact them negatively, that no is the right answer, even though it could impact them negatively?
It varies with each person, and it
Okay.
varies, and it varies. How it varies is what that person's belief systems are, and what their value systems are, and what they believe to be right and wrong, or what is truth and what is not true. So As always, it's important to have all the information you have that you should have in order to make that decision, because a lot of people say no too quickly without knowing exactly what is going on and without knowing exactly how this no will affect themselves first and foremost, and affect others. So once you have all that information in front of you and you are able to weigh the pros and the cons of making this choice, you are able to make an informed decision
Mhm.
as to whether or not you're going to say yes or no. A lot of people just say no, just are saying no, say and don't know what they're saying, why they're saying no, they're just saying no. Whereas a lot of people they're saying no because based upon the information that they have.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you have it varies with each person, but at the end of the day, one has to have all the information in front of them in order for them to really say yes or no to something.
Yeah. And that brings up, when you get into intimate relationships, and one of the challenges that you're hearing a lot of conversation around right now, and this is, been around for decades, but right now, especially when it comes to intimate relationships between men and women,
Mm-hmm.
importance of respecting them.
Yep.
So, um, when someone says no, and I think we got into this a little bit in the last episode, the
Yeah.
concern is that the other person might react in a
Yeah.
negative way. And so, therefore, you choose not to say no because you want to avoid that reaction, which may be out
Yeah.
of fear for your own life. So
Mm-hmm.
you
That's
don't say
true.
no because you're in a situation and an environment that feels hostile to you. It
Mm-hmm.
feels um, uncomfortable.
And
And
nobody. And the thing about it is when you're in that situation, you don't want to stir the pot.
right, right. Whereas if you understand yourself in that situation and you recognize that you can say no, there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a reaction that you have to be prepared for. But if you
Mm-hmm.
let that person know why you're saying no, they might be able to come at you with a different approach.
Yep.
And a big part of it is how you recognize the importance and the power of no, and that
Mm-hmm.
it's, if you're saying no just to cut the person off, you're going to get one response. But if you're
Yep. That's
saying
true.
no to say, hey, no, we can't do this way.
Yeah.
Well, now you've given context to say, well, what way, can we go about doing this?
And that cultivates discussion, and
Right.
that cultivates communication and finding out exactly what the other person needs. Well,
Right.
not and what you need as well in order for you to come to some sort of resolution on the issue. So yes.
And and when we go down this road, when you think of it from the standpoint of choice,
Yeah.
that again, when you're in an experience with somebody and you're presented with a question and you choose to say no,
Yeah.
this allows you to go back to the experience and reinvestigate it
Yep.
and look at, the positives versus the negatives. Okay, you're saying no. Why are you saying no? Because apparently there are certain things that are negative. What are
Mm-hmm.
these negative things? Okay, let's look at the positive things. What are the positive
uh,
things?
mm-hmm.
Okay, do you like the positive things? Yes. Okay, how do we get those positive things to be
Mm-hmm.
accentuated, and we work on those things to get to a yes?
Yes, but the thing about it is you have to look at the positive. You still have to look at the positives, yes, but it has to be 50-50 on positives and negatives.
Right, you have to correct the negatives or redirect them towards the positives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But
And
sometimes you can't do that. In in certain situations, you're not able to do that. So
why
what
why
will
are you not
happen?
able to do that?
Well, Depending on the situation and depending on what the facts are, sometimes you're not able to to translate a no into a yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're not able to do that. Sometimes you just have to take the facts for what they are.
Right. And
And
it simply could be the information presented. There's no way to overcome that
exactly,
circumstance.
exactly. And at that point, you have to make a decision that is true to what speaks to you.
Right. Right. And that presents the other part of this, which is listening to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of no isn't so much about anybody else. It's really about listening to yourself, isn't it?
Uh-huh, exactly. And listening to what that little voice, that little voice called our intuition. It is so powerful, and a lot of people ignore it to their own detriment. So when that little voice speaks to you and says to you, this is not the right thing to do, listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to it. I wish a lot of people, because it would save them a world of hurt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I think that's a big part of our human experience is that too often for, you know, positive or negative experiences that we um, feel that we can control,
That is true.
we choose not to listen to ourselves and say no. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that brings up, you know, I think from the standpoint of our intimate relationships, and you had touched on this in an earlier episode, but our
Mm-hmm.
ability to grow
Yep.
is also tied to our ability to stand up for ourselves and say no, isn't it?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Also true.
And
Also true.
why is it so difficult for us to understand that we actually become more for the other person when we go through these experiences together?
Because I think it's some more along the lines of fear of losing the other person. I think that is where it comes from. The fear of the loss of fear of loss.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody wants to have that person to grow with them, but nobody wants to stir the pot, or nobody wants to bring up certain things to cultivate healthy discussions and healthy resolutions to issues, and ultimately be growing and becoming more and becoming better. A lot of people just want to stick to the status quo and don't ruffle any feathers. But people need to understand that we are all spiritual beings on a human journey. Or I should say, yes, all spiritual beings on a human journey, and vice versa too.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have to keep that in mind. And when we stick up for ourselves and we stand up and say no to certain things, we are able to learn certain lessons in order for us to move on to another level of wisdom, another level of consciousness, consciousness to what is inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
So stand up for yourself, man.
And you know, this is obviously we will have to discuss this more on another episode. But this
Mm-hmm.
idea of letting go, and a big
Yeah.
part of being able to say no is being comfort, you know, having comfort in letting go. Because
Mm-hmm.
the minute that you use those two letters together and oh,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes you're saying, "Hey, I'm comfortable with this not going any further."
That is true.
And letting go of whatever possibilities as well as, you know, feelings and experiences existed at
Mm-hmm.
that point. Now that's easy for someone to do in the beginning stages of a relationship, but
That
once
is
you
true.
get into in a relationship and it's established, being able to say no and cultivate healthy conversation is
Yep.
really more about your interests in the relationship.
Hmm.
And if you say no and you don't present any alternatives, then for the other person, it could be sort of like, well, wait a second, what's going on here?
Exactly. Hmm. That's
And
why we have to have all the information when we're making the decision, whether it be no or yes. We
right.
have to have all the information, and we have to have a reasonable explanation to give when we make a decision.
So the power of no is not just in saying those, two letters together. The power of
Hmm.
no is in really being able to say it with context and explanation so
Hmm.
that
And the
someone
conviction.
can understand, and conviction, because
Hmm.
it's really to let somebody know, you know, where your boundaries are as well as what your interests are.
That is true.
And let's just use a salesperson for example. A salesperson tries to sell you something, and you can say,
Mhm.
no, I'm not interested. And just saying
Yeah.
I'm not interested lets the person know that whatever they've said has not, sparked something inside of you.
Exactly.
But if they want to come to you at that point and say, okay, so are you not interested in the product, or are you not interested in me?
Yeah.
Now there's a conversation.
Exactly. Hmm.
And there you can then find out, okay, well, if they're not interested in the product, does the person have other products? If they're not interested in you, then is it something that I said, or is it just my tone of voice?
Hmm.
Is it what I'm wearing? Is it, so the power of no is, in how you explain it to somebody else. Because now if you say, no, I'm not interested. And, I think you're a really nice person, but I just don't like the way you're selling it to me.
Yeah.
Now, all of
Exactly.
a sudden, that person's like, okay, so it's not that they have a problem with me in terms of who I am, but
Hmm.
obviously I need to get some better training on in terms of how I sell
Exactly.
this. Because they're
Exactly.
just like, yeah, you're not interesting me at all with this sale.
Exactly. And that information will obviously compel you to possibly take a course in speaking or in sales, so you can develop those skills. So when the next time when somebody else comes along and you're able to and you are speaking to them about what you're offering, you can get a possible yes. So it's the power of no. It's always a lesson on improvement.
Yeah, it's
Always.
it's 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 a chance to redirect if you look at it that
Yes.
way.
Yes.
And it's both for the person saying it and the person receiving it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome.
Both ends of the spectrum. There's a lot of things to be learned from the power of no.
Any last thoughts for our listeners?
Don't make anybody force you into anything you don't want to do. Okay?
All right.
If you
And
need to say no, and do not apologize for it. But when you are saying no, give your reasons why so the other person can understand where you're coming from.
correct. All right.
Good.
And
All
to our
right.
listeners, as always, we're so grateful for you tuning in, and we look forward to you tuning in for the next episode. Have a great day.
See you next time.
Take care.